Hello, welcome to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I'm Helen, and today I am giving you 8 romance recommendations that feature psychopath heroes. Now, we read quite a lot of psychopathic characters, or definitely characters who are sociopaths, and these mainly appear in dark and mafia romances. So all of these are either dark or mafia romances. So please check your trigger warnings before you read any of these books, because the heroes in these are true psychopaths, and while it's fascinating to read, it can obviously also be disturbing as well, and these are the people that are prepared to do anything and don't particularly have remorse for it. Now, in terms of the definition of a psychopath, we are talking here about people who lack empathy and therefore don't feel remorse or feelings of guilt. They usually exhibit antisocial behaviour, and so of course these are dark and mafia romances, so a lot of them are not afraid to hurt other people, shall we say. Now, this is not necessarily a trait that all psychopaths have. Obviously, I want to caveat this by saying that people who are kind of diagnosed as being psychopaths obviously aren't all evil people who hurt animals and unalive people. There are many levels and ranges within psychopathy. It's definitely a mental condition and is obviously needs to be properly diagnosed by a doctor. But all of the books I'm going to talk about today do have a character who is a psychopath, and in most of these cases it's explicitly stated that they are so by the author, and therefore I'm not making assumptions about their personality, but the author themselves has written these characters to be a psychopath. So I just kind of want to put that out there as well, because I don't want to offend anyone or upset anyone if I'm using kind of the wrong terms or the wrong languages about this particular mental condition. But obviously in a dark or mafia romance, like I say, this type of personality does crop up on more than one occasion, and there are ranges, right? So there are scales of how kind of unhinged somebody might be because they don't have emotions and can't feel guilt about their actions. The flip side to this is that many psychopaths are also very charismatic, very manipulative, very intelligent and brilliant kind of people, and we definitely see that in these books that I'm going to recommend as well. Okay, so the first one I'm going to recommend is Stolen Touches by Neva Altaj, and this one is book 5 in her Perfectly Imperfect series. And this one we're following Mylene, and our main hero is Salvatore, who is our psychopath, and he is head of the Cosa Nostra in New York. Now, he is known to be a very brutal and violent man, someone who does not have emotions, does not have any guilt, but also a very kind of private person. Not many people have seen him or kind of really know what he looks like, so his reputation very much precedes him, and he's just known to be kind of very, very brutal and controlling. In addition to being a psychopath, Salvatore also does have some form of OCD. He is very sort of compulsive and obsessive about certain things, and when he finally meets our heroine, this definitely plays into that quite a lot. Now, Marlene is actually a mafia princess, but she doesn't want to be part of the mafia. She doesn't want to be restricted by what her family expects of her, and she's actually training to be a nurse. So she has gone to New York to be a nurse in a hospital. The thing is, anyone from her family is not supposed to be in Salvatore's territory. So if she is found out, if anyone finds out that she's there, if Salvatore finds out, she could be in a lot of danger. But really, she thinks that she is a bit of a nobody. How is anyone going to find out? She's living a very simple life away from her mafia family and living a life of a nurse at this hospital. The thing is, a couple of things conspire against her, and one of those things is that Salvatore happens to be coming out of the hospital. I can't remember exactly why he's there, but maybe one of his men is injured or something like that. And as he's coming out of the hospital, there is this couple who have pulled into the car park. The woman is in labour, basically is about to have a baby, and Mylene is happening to go into work, and she sees this couple in the car park. She goes over to assist, and as Salvatore is walking past, she kind of asks for his assistance, and she even takes his coat to basically use as kind of, you know, something to wrap around the mother and the baby, and this baby is then delivered in this car park. And so Salvatore and Mylene's paths cross in this moment. Now Salvatore takes an instant like to her, and he doesn't quite know why he's so obsessed with her, but he definitely is, and so he endeavours to find out as much as he can about her and kind of starts to stalk her. So he figures out before she does, you know, she has no clue who he is. Like I said, people don't know what he looks like, but he figures out who she is. And then this plays right into his hands because he really wanted to be with her. She's kind of deflected his advances. He's become obsessed with her, like I say, stalking her to some degree. But when he finds out who she is, this gives him the leverage he absolutely needs, because now he can give the family an ultimatum. And that is either he's going to unalive her, and that's his threat. Of course, he's not going to do that, or she's going to have to enter into an arranged marriage with him. And so her family agree, and Mylene is now forced to marry Salvatore and deal with him and all his little quirks, because like I said, not only is he a psychopath and is struggling to understand his feelings for this person because he's never felt anything before, but also he has got OCD, like I said, and becomes absolutely obsessed with her, tracking her every movement, wanting her to check in, wanting to know where she is at all times, and becomes very passionate about wanting to know that, let's say that. But I really kind of love this character, love this couple, and would definitely recommend. So next up then, I've got Posey Run by Kate C. Wells, and this is book 1 in the Underboss Insurrection series. And we're following Posey and Dario is our psychopath hero in this one. Now on the outside, he absolutely appears to be Prince Charming, right? This is a very handsome man, very charismatic, also very intelligent, and he works in the mafia, and he's kind of their money man. He's the one that is kind of like doing the deals, making the money, hiding the money, all of that good stuff, and he is very intelligent. Now he is going out with Posey. So at the start of this book, Dario and Posey are boyfriend and girlfriend. In fact, they live together, and at this point Dario is really doing it for appearances. It's nice to have a woman around, right? And it helps him kind of like appear to be normal, and like I say, he can turn on the charm when he wants to be. And Posey really thinks he's her Prince Charming. She's a bit of a nobody. She can't believe somebody like him that would want to be with her, and she's pretty besotted with him, I'll say that. And she's not had a good time of it. She's had a pretty tough time in the past, and so she's so relieved to finally kind of have Dario's protection and to be living with him and for him to be taking care of her and all of that. But it all comes to a head when Dario is told that Posey has been cheating on him, and is presented with some video footage of her with another man. Now Dario is being duped here because this is an old video of a previous incident that Posey was involved in, and something that she is very ashamed of and never wanted Dario to know about, and hence she's never told him this. But he's kind of duped into believing that this video is kind of like recent, and that she has in fact gone off with somebody else. As a result, he is absolutely livid and basically confronts her, and then basically tells her that she better run, otherwise he's going to unalive her, and gives her very little time to get away. So his kind of friend takes her in a car to the train station and pretty much says, you better get away, and she does. And this is where she kind of realises that maybe Dario isn't quite as charismatic and charming as she thought he was, and underneath lurks this very kind of like evil kind of person who clearly doesn't care about what happens to her, and is pretty much going to unalive her if he ever sees her face again. And so she goes on the run and is very afraid. Of course, it doesn't take Dario too long to realise that he's been duped, and when he figures out kind of what's going on, he decides now that he wants Posey back, because suddenly he goes from somebody who doesn't care about her at all and really kind of just casts her off a little bit, to suddenly being one, violently angry that she would do this to him, but also becomes obsessed with tracking her down and bringing her back to him. And of course, she is going to be terrified when he finally catches up with her to bring her back, drag her back, kicking and screaming. She's obviously going to be terrified of him, and she's going to kind of realise who he really is as a person, and they're going to have to kind of work through that and reforge their relationship, and she's going to have to learn to live with somebody who is basically a psychopath. Now, I saw somebody's review on this, and I thought this was brilliant, and brilliantly describes not only Dario but other psychopaths. And it says, you know, he's the kind of guy that will murder everyone else in the world, but you, even though he could kill you at any time, he won't, but he could. And I thought that was kind of brilliant, because you never know, do you? You always think they're going to be horrible to everyone else but me, but the heroine. But it's always that question of, will they though? Because they could at any time. Okay, next up I've got a book by Rena Kent, and in fact I've got two recommendations from Rena Kent. And I think Rena Kent does psychopath heroes really well. In fact, quite a lot of her books do feature a psychopath in some way, and in her recent Legacy of the Gods series, this was no different. There were several psychopaths in this series, and I'm going to talk about two of them. So the first book in the series, and the first book I'm going to talk about today, is God of Malice. This is a dark sort of college romance, and it's a bit of a spin-off. It's a Next Gen series from some of her other series that she's done. And in here we are following Killian and Glyndon. Now, Killian is one of those kind of true psychopaths that we kind of read about and end up, you know, being serial killers. And it was clear that he was born like this. So he's a born psychopath. And when he was a very young boy, he started to hurt animals, and his mother was obviously very, very shocked, unhappy, distressed about this situation. And because of who his parents are, they kind of helped him to deal with it and channel his more violent side into something a little bit more positive. So over time, Killian's kind of realised that when he acts like a psychopath and does bad things, he gets a really bad reaction, and he really cares about his mother in particular and doesn't want to see her sad or upset. And so he has grown up kind of trying to, like I say, trying to channel his true nature and hide it from society, and has become very, very good at masking his lack of emotions, if you like, and acts normal. So he's very, very capable of acting completely normal, responding to things in the way that people would expect him to respond, but it's all an act for him, and he's just become very, very adept at you know, acting like a normal person. But the truth is extremely intelligent. He gets bored very easily. He wants to understand, like, one of the reasons he was hurting animals is not because he like enjoyed torturing them. He wants to see inside things. So he kind of has this gruesome appetite, if you like, for cutting things open to see what's inside, understanding what makes them tick. How does something work? And as a result, he's training to be a doctor, and particularly a surgeon, to kind of fuel this appetite in him that he kind of just wants to cut people open, basically. So potentially quite a scary character. Glyndon is a really, really sweet girl, but unfortunately for her, she catches Killian's eye, and once he's becomes infatuated with her, he's also going to want to do the same thing to Glyndon. He's going to want to figure out what makes her tick, what makes her work, how many buttons he can push, how far can he actually push her. But she doesn't really respond the way he expects, and he's constantly intrigued by her and wanting to learn more. And although he doesn't really feel like he can love her in the way that other people love her, he knows that he doesn't want to be without her. He absolutely wants them to be together, and becomes obsessed with owning her, owning every part of her. And so that, I find him a very, very fascinating character. We get some really good chapters from his perspective in terms of what he's thinking, and you know, and then from her perspective, learning how to deal with him and coming to terms with the fact that she's fallen in love with somebody who can never really truly love her in the same way that people with emotions really do, but he is going to love her in his own way, and it's going to mean for him that he never wants to be without her. Like I say, check your trigger warnings. There is an essay at the start of this book by the hero to the heroine, but I think it's brilliantly done, and you know, you just want to keep reading more and really kind of like, you know, fall under Killian's trap, if you like, just as much as Glyndon does. So I would definitely recommend. So the second one I want to talk about, still in this series, is God of Ruin by Rena Kent, and this is book 4 in the Legacy of the God series, and in this one we're following Mia and Landon. Now, Landon is actually Glyndon's brother, but he's also kind of a psychopath. He literally feels nothing, and he gets off on like anarchy and destruction basically, because again, very much like Killian, he's just bored, and so he kind of wants to constantly try and find his emotions, if you like, and the more destructive he is, the more he pushes other people's buttons, the more he plays mind games with people. This is like interesting to him, and so he kind of continues to escalate basically. But people are very scared of him because they kind of know that he will stop at nothing basically. There's nothing that is a hard line for him. Yeah, and even his twin brother is a little bit scared of him. The thing is, like with many other psychopaths, Landon is a genius, and in fact he is a very, very talented artist. In particular, he's a talented sculptor, and he's constantly striving for perfection. Even people look at his pieces of work, his art, they absolutely think he is a genius. Every single thing he produces is a masterpiece, but he's never happy with it. It's never perfect enough. It's never what he wants to produce, until he meets Mia, and she very much becomes his muse. And so he very much becomes fascinated with her and kind of forces her into a relationship with him and to be with him while he is sculpting. And he basically kind of captures her, if you like, takes her to his remote house that he's got, where he kind of like sculpts in private, and he brings her there, and like I say, she becomes his muse, where he creates sculpture after sculpture, but kind of based on her, with her inspiring him to do things. And of course, while they are in this place, they're going to get closer together, and things are going to kind of go from there. And very much like Killian and his obsession with Glyndon, Landon becomes very much obsessed with Mia and needs her to be with him. So he's, although he does kind of lack emotions in the normal sense, he becomes absolutely possessive, jealous and obsessed with Mia, but needing her to be near him because he needs her to, you know, create amazing masterpieces. So this is very fascinating to see what goes on in his mind, but also what goes on in her mind as well. So if you like a psychopath hero, I would definitely recommend the whole of the Legacy of the God series, because there's more than one in there, but in particular I think Killian and Landon are great examples of this, so definitely would recommend. Next up then, I have one of the most frightening psychopaths I've ever read. I present to you Dare from Even If It Hurts by Sam Mariano. Now, if you've ever read any of Sam Mariano's before, then you know that her heroes are on another level, right? She creates some of the most interesting, complex male characters that I've ever read. Very, very manipulative, very obsessed with their women, and usually once they've decided that a woman belongs to them, the woman has absolutely no choice but to go along with it, because she cannot say no. However, until I read Dare's character, there was always something very much about these Sam Mariano's male characters that you could absolutely fall in love with, because they were kind of like cruel, kind of vicious men on the outside, and sometimes they were very manipulative and cruel to their women, at least at first. But ultimately, by the time we got the HEA, we really, really believed that the two people were genuinely in love and that they were in the right place. But I felt when I read Even If It Hurts that Dare was a true psychopath, extremely cold, very cunning, extremely manipulative, like I said, And I never felt that Aubrey, who is our main female character in here, and his love interest, that she ever really gets her HEA. Aubrey is very, very much a prisoner of Dare's, and while she does love him and she wants to be with him, I never got the sense that if she changed her mind or ever wanted to leave, that Dare would ever let her get away. So she was kind of like forced into this relationship, and therefore, yeah, Dare has to rank up there as the, like I say, the most frightening character that I've kind of ever read, but also brilliant. So Dare and Aubrey are the characters in this one. This is book 1 in the Coastal Elite series, and this is very much kind of a high school romance as we move from high school into college. So Dare is a psychopath. Again, he's one of those characters that kind of get bored really easily, is constantly pushing boundaries, seeing how much he can get away with. And Aubrey very much comes into his orbit when Dare's girlfriend at the time, who's also a little bit unhinged and a little bit crazy, she causes a bit of a scene in a clothing store where Aubrey happens to work. Aubrey refuses to give her a refund for clothes that clearly weren't even bought at the store. She doesn't have a receipt and has been worn. And when Aubrey basically says, no, I'm not giving you a refund, this girlfriend decides that she's going to make Aubrey's life a living hell. And she goes to Dare and basically says, Dare, will you help me make Aubrey's life a living hell? Now, Dare becomes instantly intrigued by Aubrey, and he basically agrees with his girlfriend that he's going to help her. But Dare has got an ulterior motive, because he's going to help the girlfriend, but not fully. And what he's going to do is use it as an excuse to get close to Aubrey. So the girlfriend thinks he's doing it to help her get revenge, but really he's doing it because he just wants to be with Aubrey. And so Dare starts to play his own games, his own mind games basically, and very much manipulates Aubrey into a situation where they end up together as a couple. But when the girlfriend realizes that maybe this is more real than she thought, things are going to go sideways. What makes this super scary, like I say, is that Dare is extremely manipulative. We don't get very much from his POV at all. We have no idea what he's thinking, what he is prepared to do and isn't prepared to do. And there's a scene in this book where we have no idea what Dare's motivations are, or like I say, whose side he's really on. Is he on the girlfriend's side? Does he really love Aubrey? Is he going to keep her safe? Or what is going to happen? And Aubrey doesn't quite know either. She thinks she can trust her. She does trust him on one level, but she's also very, very aware that he is absolutely capable of doing everything he kind of threatens to do. And there's a moment in here where Aubrey's really not sure whether Dare is acting or whether he's going to fully carry out some threats that he's been making. And we don't know either. So it's very, very sinister, very, very scary. And like I said, by the time we actually get to the end of this book, Aubrey's now trapped in Dare's orbit, and Dare has absolutely no intention of ever giving Aubrey up. And he is not particularly nice to her. Whether a lot of psychopaths turn nice for their women, let them do whatever they want, Dare is very, very controlling, very manipulative. He pushes all her friends away so that she only has him to rely on, and that is kind of where they go next in the story. Now, what I will say about this is that maybe Dare and Aubrey will get their HEA in the future, because this series continues. We see Dare and Aubrey in future books and other stories, and we know more books are coming in this series, and I'm sure we haven't seen the last of Dare or of Aubrey. And so it'll be really interesting to see how much more we get from them and where they end up at the end of this series. But I really, really hope we get a little bit more from Dare, because as it was, I thought this book was absolutely brilliant. I rated it 5 stars, but Dare is not my favourite San Mariano character. Brilliantly written, but extremely frightening, and don't feel safe with him at all, let's say that. Next up then, I've got something slightly different, and this is Hervelin by S.M. La Violette. This is an historical dark romance, and in this one we are following David and Calliope. Now, David is a great example of somebody who wasn't born as a psychopath. At least we don't believe he was. This is someone who's bred to be a psychopath, right? Because he's had a very traumatic childhood, a very traumatic upbringing, and even when he is older and he enters work, shall we say, he joins the military, he continues to see more horrific things and experiences more trauma, and that has led him to being a man who doesn't feel emotions. He's very cold, very calculating, again very, very intelligent kind of person, but completely lacks any kind of empathy or emotion. But that makes him extremely brilliant at the job that he does, because like I said, he ended up going into the military, he was trained as an assassin and now works for the Crown. So he's basically a kind of spy slash James Bond sort of character for the British government, basically at the end of the 1800s. Like I say, his disposition makes him perfect for the job that he does. Now, at the start of this book, we are very much aware that he has been asked to undertake his next sort of job. We don't 100% know what that job is, but he's now living in London. He's recently rented out a house and he works for the stock exchange. And this is kind of his, I guess, his normal everyday persona, where he's a businessman, he's an investor working in the stock exchange. And that's his job by day, but of course by night he is this kind of like assassin, if you like, this spy for the government. Now, because of his kind of personality, his disposition, he's not really suited to have a relationship with anyone or to be anyone's husband, but he obviously does still have sexual appetites. And so he usually satisfies his urges by employing sex workers. And so this is where he meets our heroine, Calliope, because Calliope is a sex worker. She happens to work in a brothel in London, but this brothel is closing down because the owner basically gambled all his money away and now he needs to close it down. As a result, she's kind of out of work and all of her money's been stolen as well. She was saving up so that she could travel to the United States of America to start a new life. But like I say, all her money's been stolen, so now she doesn't have any savings. She is out of a job and she now has nowhere to live either. Now, David happens to turn up at the exact moment she's about to be kicked out, and he, you know, doesn't care about selecting anyone. She's the first woman he sees and he's like, hey, how about you come and spend the night with me? And so she immediately takes him up on the offer because, you know, it's a roof over her head for the night, right? So she goes back with him and she realizes that he's quite an intelligent, very well dressed, clearly wealthy individual who happens to live in a nice house, and she thinks, hey, maybe I can convince him to let me stay for the weekend. At first he's not too keen on the idea because, like I say, he just wants her for one night and then he wants to move on, but actually she intrigues him, and in particular she's a really good chess player. He loves playing chess and she gives him a run for his money. And so when he discovers this, he thinks, hang on a minute, maybe this could work out, maybe she can hang around for a little bit longer. And so that's what they agree to, and in the end she ends up staying for several weeks. He employs her to stay with him for several weeks, and she thinks this is brilliant, right? Because she gets a roof over her head, she gets 3 square meals a day, she gets to save up money to finally buy her ticket to America, and she gets to spend a bit of time with this man while she's doing it. And so they kind of enter into this relationship. Now, she starts very much to figure out a bit more about David, who he is as a person. He is very awkward, I'll say that. So basically, whereas some of the other psychopaths we've seen, they've been very charismatic, very manipulative, and able to emulate emotions and normal behaviour, David very much cannot. He does not know how to interact. His social skills are appalling, and she very quickly realises that there's something very different about him, and he's very socially awkward. But she thinks this is charming, right? It's kind of like sweet, and it really endears him to her, and he starts to think actually there's a benefit here, because he could do with someone going with him to social events, someone who can have conversations with people that might help him out for what he's trying to do. And so, you know, she's really good for him in that sense, and he's quite good for her. The thing is, this one is sort of a dark romance. It's bordering on, I would say, an erotic romance as well. There is a lot of spice in here, and in particular, David has got specific appetites, and so there's a little there's elements in here of BDSM as well, so I will say that, but all brilliantly done. Really enjoyed it, and you know, it was really, really interesting to see this play out. And like I say, David just trying to act more normal and start to, you know, work out how he's going to change his behaviour a little bit, maybe, so he can settle into a relationship with her. Now obviously Calliope ends up hoping that he's going to fall in love with her, but she realises very quickly that that's not really possible, and that no matter what she does or how long they're together, he's never going to truly love her because he's just not capable. However, he's going to love her in his own way. He's going to start to really want to be with her, want to really protect her, and ultimately they're going to get their own form of HEA. So I really did enjoy this one. There is a twist at the end. There's lots going on with the espionage stuff, so very, very interesting to read. But also, like I said, very spicy read as well. Next up then, I've got Vicious Hearts by Jagger Cole. This is book 2 in the Dark Heart series. And in this one, we're following Killian, who is head of the Irish Mafia, and Luna, who is actually an assassin who has been hired to unalive him. And this book very much starts where Killian is in a sex club. She goes there pretending to be a patron. She kind of seduces him, gets him into a room with her, and then while they are, you know, in the act, she gets out a knife and she goes to stab him. She leaves him for dead, basically. She thinks she's managed to complete her task, but he is still alive, and he manages to get the medical assistance he needs, comes back to full health, and then of course he becomes absolutely obsessed with tracking her down and getting his revenge on her, because Luna really has picked the wrong man to upset, because Killian, again, is a true psychopath. He's very much described as a monster wrapped in charm and sophistication, but he really doesn't have any emotions, he doesn't really have any feelings, he definitely doesn't experience regret or remorse or any kind of guilt, but he does very much care about his family and wants to make sure they're safe, and we've seen that kind of before. But like I say, he becomes absolutely obsessed with finding this woman who had the audacity to try and end his life, and he's not going to rest until he finally tracks her down. Of course, in his obsession with her, he learns more about her, finds out more about her, and when he finally catches up to her, he's maybe not going to be able to do what he wants to do, and he's going to have to kind of keep her and then basically force her into a marriage with him. But of course, we do find out a lot more about why she is an assassin, who sent her, and all of that good stuff. So again, I really, really like this one, because not only is Killian a fascinating character, but there's a really good backstory in here, and we learn much more about what's going on. And of course, Killian is one of those types of psychopathic heroes that we love, because while he is emotionless and cruel with anyone else, ultimately when he learns more about Una, he ends up having feelings for her and therefore wants to protect her, not to unalive her. And finally then, a recent read for me is Twisted Emotions by Cora Riley. This is book 2 in the Camorra Chronicles Mafia series. This is another bred psychopath, because we are following Nina and Chiara in this one. Now Nino, we don't believe was born a psychopath, but he's another character who experienced an extreme amount of torture when he was quite a young boy, and as a result he has learned to mask his emotions, and he has become kind of very emotionless, not easily triggered. He isn't very quick to anger, but he's coldly ruthless. He's the, you know, he's intelligent. He is the strategist in this mafia family, and he is the yin to Remo's yang. So Remo is the head of the Camorra. He's the eldest brother. We understand that he is very, very emotional, very, very fiery, absolutely is very quick to anger, and you know, will make drastic decisions very quickly. Nino is completely opposite to that. He's very calm, very calculated, you know, uses logic to make decisions, is not easily swayed by emotions, it doesn't easily get angered, and you know, is the cold brother. As a result, he's got a very frightening persona, right? People are very much scared of Nino, so his reputation very much precedes him. Then we have our heroine in this one, Chiara. Now she is a mafia princess. She is the cousin of Luca, who is one of our heroes from the first series and is head of the New York Mafia. And basically when the Camorra and New York Mafia need to form an alliance, Nino logically agrees to be arranged in marriage, and Luca puts forward Chiara as somebody who is of marriageable age, is currently available, and in fact nobody else really wants to marry her because although she's a mafia princess and is Luca's cousin, so is you know, a high-ranking mafia princess at that, her father actually betrayed the mafia and was punished for his crime, and as such she's kind of a bit of an outcast, a bit of a pariah in their mafia. So this kind of really kills two birds with one stone. By agreeing to marry Nino, Chiara is not only doing something good for the family, but she also gets out of there, right, where people have been looking down on her for quite some time. She finally gets to leave, and kind of this is a fresh start for her. The thing is, she is also extremely scared of Nino. She's terrified about what's going to happen on their wedding night, because there is still this old tradition where a woman is supposed to be a virgin on their wedding night, and therefore after they consummate the marriage, the sheets are shared with all of the guests in the morning, because there's supposed to be blood on the sheets, which confirms not only was the bride a virgin, but also that they've consummated the marriage. And she's absolutely terrified because she's heard about Nino's reputation, and she's scared that he is going to be kind of like cruel and violent with her. In addition to that, she's also experienced a lot of trauma herself in the past, and she was actually sexually assaulted when she was just a teenager, and as a result she's got a huge amount of trauma from this, and is therefore afraid for even anyone to touch her, let alone want to sleep with her. And so there are multiple reasons why she is scared to death to marry Nino, but still goes through with the marriage because she wants to do the right thing by the family. Of course, Nino recognises straight away that there's something wrong and convinces her to tell him the truth about what's happened and what's gone on. And when he hears about what her family member has done to her, and that person happens to be a guest at the wedding, Nino makes a decision and says, hey, well, there needs to be blood on the sheets, but it doesn't have to be yours, and basically promptly goes and gets the man that did this to her and makes sure that it's his blood that ends up on the sheet. So we have a very, very kind of dramatic and violent start to this book, and then the rest of this book is their marriage after they've got back to Las Vegas, and how are they going to kind of like learn more about each other, get to know each other, and kind of settle into this marriage between them. And once she realizes that he is not as terrifying and as scary as she thought, she starts to really trust him and want to be with him, and they try and figure out how they can be physically close to each other as well. And I thought this was done really, really well from that perspective. But it's also fascinating to see Nino, because he's a psychopath, right? But he's very observant of other people. He understands how people should act. And so he sort of says to her, tell me how you want me to act and I will act that way. And she kind of has to make the decision that, okay, she knows it's not real, but she would much prefer the illusion of reality and him to pretend to kiss her and hug her and be kind to her, and know that he's acting, but rather that than him just being cold and indifferent towards her. And so she kind of has to make this difficult choice. Do you want to live in this kind of illusion because I'm not capable of giving it to you for real? And she chooses the illusion over reality, basically. But as he emulates these emotions and takes specific actions, how much of that is real, how much of it is acting, and there's a fine line between both, right? And are we going to eventually start picking a hole in Nino's walls that he's built around himself to kind of keep the emotions out, and what cracks are going to start to appear? And so I thought it was really, really interesting how this one kind of played out. So there we go, that's 8 romance recommendations that feature a psychopath hero. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and all that's left for me to do is say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Ultimately, when Luna ultimately, is it Una? Una, not Luna. Very very charismatic, very manipulative, and like I said, by the time we actually get to the end of this book, Aubrey's now trapped in Dare's trap, if you like. And so again, and this is very fascinating to see not only what goes in his mind, but what goes in her mind. Not on all evil, unalivers, aren't all evil people who unalive, you know,